Summer.
How are you?
I'm good. How are you today?
Pretty good.
Good. So we are recording, but I want to be really clear that if we go into any areas that are something you don't want to post online, that's totally okay.
Okay.
And we don't have to post it. So this is the time that I'm going to coach with you, and the idea is to share it online so that other people can see what coaching is like and what an experience with me is like. However, you are a priority for me over being able to post it. So if we happen to touch on something, then that's okay. We'll just do a different one.
Okay, thank you. And I do appreciate you meeting with me.
You're welcome. So what would you like to explore today? Actually, let me back up really quick. Have you ever had coaching before?
I have not. My husband and I went to counseling for a few years at the beginning of our marriage. But other than that, I haven't had any individual counseling or coaching.
Got it. So let me distinguish a little bit of the difference between therapy and coaching. Therapy tends to unpack what has been and what has happened and what got you to where you are. And there's definitely an aspect of that with coaching. But coaching, what I love about coaching, what has been so life-changing for me, is it focuses on what's possible. And you absolutely have to unpack what happened in order to get to what's possible and to close that gap. But that's not the main focus. The main focus is, okay, let's look at what behaviors turned into the actions that you have now and what experiences created the behaviors that you have now, because for whatever reason you're doing those to suit your needs. But if you want to get over here at the top of the mountain, what do we need to add, remove, or transform in order to do that? So then it's just coaching is continuing on the journey, and it's a coach by your side going, okay, you got this, you got this. This would make sense to do this old thing if you were looking at it from that past place, but we're gonna look at it from a fresh set of eyes and with curiosity. So that's kind of the difference with coaching and therapy. And I'm not a therapist, just for legal reasons. I am no therapist, but it definitely comes into play with what we do in this space. And what's fun is we can start to see the patterns we've created to formulate the life we have, and all of a sudden we start to recognize how our outer experience is a reflection of our inner landscape. And when we change our inner landscape, all of a sudden everything shifts around us.
That makes sense.
Yeah. Any questions about that?
No. I do appreciate you talking to me, though, and I know you said you're not a therapist, but I know you've done an awful lot of research and studying, and so I feel like you do know what you're talking about. So I trust you, and I trust your advice.
Thank you. So what would you like to explore today, Summer?
Okay, so I would like to explore talking about fear and anxiety and learning how to manage that. And specifically when circumstances are stressful and circumstances are difficult, being able to kind of navigate that, but without feeling completely out of control. Just because especially recently, there's been a lot of times in my life where external factors, like everything outside of me, has been very much out of control. And I really want to get to a point to where I can navigate that without taking that on into my personality and also becoming out of control, because everything else makes me feel powerless, so to speak.
So what is something that happened recently in the last week that you can refer to specifically for this?
Okay, so my mom is in the ICU. She's been in the ICU since last Friday. She has polycystic kidney disease, so she is chronically ill and has been for a long time. She's not a candidate for a kidney transplant or a liver. Her liver is also damaged by the polycystic kidney disease. And she's been sick for most of my life, starting when I was a child. When she was in her late 20s, her father had the same disease, and my sister has it too. And so I've known that she was ill, and she's been ill most of my life. But here recently, it's getting to the point to where she's actually in ICU and she's unresponsive. So we're kind of facing my family is facing losing her, and then there's a lot of issues that come up with that. And then we just recently lost my dad. It was a year. Last March was a year.
I want to pause you for a second. I want to be with this, right where that is, because that is the source of the fear and the anxiety.
It's true.
Yeah. Take a couple deep breaths and feel where that is. Notice where it is in your body. Okay. Where is it in your body?
In my chest.
Okay. In the upper part of your chest or like right in the center?
Lower, more where my stomach is.
Okay. Got it. So it's kind of like a gut almost feeling. Okay. Got it. Like a sinking kind of like a punch to the gut. Got it. And I could see how that would be a really debilitating physiological feeling, like where you try to catch your breath. So that's your diaphragm, and that's where you breathe, which is why breath can help. Slow down, pause, take some breaths, feel into it. It's okay to experience grief, and that's grief. There's nothing wrong there. That's normal. So that's one. Two is questions. So what are the thoughts that you're having when you have that punch to the gut feeling? What are the thoughts that are going through your mind? Just the unadulterated thoughts. Don't think about it with your analytical mind. Just say them out loud as what they are.
Just a lot of fear. My dad was always my support network. He was always the one that helped me figure things out.
Let me pause you. Let me tell you what I mean. So it's probably something, I don't want to put words in your mouth. I want to hear what the words are from you. But it's probably something like, I don't want to lose my mom. I've lost too much this year. I can't lose her. How will I support my family? How will I get them through this? I have to be strong. I don't want to do this. I love her. Why won't she wake up? Things like that. So it's usually also from a younger place. It has nothing to do with your intelligent mind and your analytical mind is the word I'm looking for. The one that rationalizes things. The teacher in you, the mother in you, the wife in you, it's none of those. It's the little girl in you. So what is she saying? Yeah, right there.
I never really had a good relationship with my mom. She and I were never close. My sister and I grew up in an abusive household, and there was a lot of childhood trauma, and most of it came from my mom and her, what we recognize now, mental illness. And the part of me that's sad is like you said, the little girl that knows that I'm never gonna have that relationship with my mom. I'm never gonna have the chance to have a healthy mother-daughter relationship if she's not here. Even when she was here, I tried, and I eventually had to close myself off from her emotionally. So then there's some guilt, now that she's leaving. I feel guilty about the walls that I put up, but it was out of self-protection, because being close to mom was dangerous. If you told her things or shared things with her, then that was ammunition. So I guess when I was a young adult, I wouldn't allow myself to be close to her anymore. So now that I know that she's dying, it's, I guess, just giving up on that, you know?
Yeah, yeah. And we can look at it as the facts and as the emotional part. So we can kind of separate those two things. The facts are your mom's in the hospital. She may not make it out. She's in the ICU. She's very sick.
Yeah.
And she's sick with something that has continued in your family. There are certain diseases that you may look it up. I find that from my personal experience, when I'm in a very emotional state, if I take it into trying to understand it, if I switch the judgment of myself and the guilt and the shame into curiosity, it moves that energy in a very different way. So I try to understand what's happening. And with family systems, trauma they're finding can go down the line. It can go down epigenetics, or that's what the study of epigenetics is about. It's about how it travels in the cells. And so it transfers from family member to family member. And when that's unhealed and when it's unknown, Carl Jung said, until we make the unconscious conscious, it will run our lives and we'll call it fate. And that's what happens. So people just continue to raise their children and raise their families, and this trauma continues, and they re-traumatize each generation because that unconscious part is not healed. And when there is a physiological thing that's being passed down in families where it's the same thing, there's a thing called ACEs. And ACEs are, have you ever heard of ACEs?
I have. I'm familiar, yeah.
Okay, so then with ACEs, the more traumatic experiences you had as a child, the more likely you're going to experience certain physiological problems in your body. But that doesn't mean it can't be undone. And you can heal those things and take care of some of the things. It's not an end all and be all. I mean, there's a place for Western medical science, but there's also a place for how we think is what we become. And there is, so I just wanted to bring up the ACEs that may be a part of that is to try to take some of the weight off of you, because you're really hard on yourself in this space with the guilt. And when we briefly spoke last time, we talked about losing your father and your father-in-law and the guilt with those and not having spent more time with them. If you separate yourself into the mother that you are now and the woman that you are now and the little girl that has needed to be protected from further abuse, is it understandable that you would have her keep a distance from people like that?
Yeah, absolutely.
Right. So be gentle in that space. You don't need to beat yourself up and have the guilt around keeping that part of you safe, because you would do the same for your daughter.
That's true.
So if this part of you were your daughter, who I've seen you with in your videos, and you have a great relationship with her, nothing like the relationship you described with your mother. If this part of you that is feeling guilty and feeling upset and feeling anxious and fearful of losing her mom that she didn't get to have a relationship with was your daughter now, what's your daughter's name, by the way?
I have 3. My youngest is Willow. She's 8.
Oh, got it. You have 3. Okay, so let's go with your youngest, because that's the one I've seen you with, Willow. So if it were Willow, what would you say to her?
I don't know.
If you had to take a guess.
Um,
So let's say she had someone she was losing that she had wanted a better relationship with, and they were in the hospital, and she was feeling really guilty for not having been there, and she wanted to have had a better relationship. What advice would you give her?
I'm sure I would focus on the parts of the relationship that were good. And I would encourage her to think about those things. And
What did you just come up on? What did you just notice?
honestly, with my mom, it's harder to think about the good things. It's harder to allow the good memories in because it's painful. And with my kids, with Willow and with my oldest two, I do try to get them to remember the good times and think about, like when my dad died, some of the fun things that they did together and how loving he was and how compassionate and sweet, and he would just do things to make them feel important and feel special. And we talk about those things. We talk about the good things. But with mom, that's hard. And I think the reason why is because in order to put up an emotional wall, you have to just kind of just forget, That's what I've done anyway. I just forget the good things, forget the bad things, and just distance. Just make distance, create distance. But if I think about the good times and when I was little, then that's painful.
Here's the thing. The other side of deep pain is deep love. And the bridge between the two is grief. The only way out is through. And when you're going through grief, you have to walk on the hot coals. And it sucks in the messy middle. And there's no way around it. But the other side is love. The other side is gratitude. The other side is joy and release. And you've spent almost a lifetime resisting that because it was too painful, because these were people you loved that you couldn't allow in your life because of abuse and toxicity and trauma. And so you created this wall, which makes sense, and a lot of people do, and I can relate. And when we start breaking down that wall, what we start to learn is the difference between armored love and boundaried love. And armored love says, you don't get to cross here. Stop. And it creates more and more and more distance. That's what armored love does. And it reacts from a place of sometimes resentment, sometimes righteousness. It's just very guarded, and it's heavy. That armor is like iron armor. But it protects you, right? It keeps you safe until it doesn't. Until a crack is in it, or you got to take it off to rest. And then you start to recognize all the emotions you've denied. And it comes in like a flood at first, especially when grief is there. So grief will just break it off immediately because you add grief to that armor and it's too heavy. You got to set it down. And then you feel like you can't stand back up again because you were so used to walking with the armor, you don't know what it's like to walk without it. Boundary love is going, I love you. And the things that happened weren't okay. But there were sprinkled parts of love throughout. It's both. It's all of it. Because that's where real love lives, is in the contrast. It's in the fact that because terrible things happened, that's how you know deep love. That's how you know how to raise your daughters. That's how you know how to do it the right way. Because you know what didn't work.
That's
And that,
true. When you said that before, I don't really know what to do to be a good mom, but I know what not to do. And so I've spent, my oldest daughter is 25, so I've spent the last 25 years just avoiding the what not to do's and sometimes getting it wrong. But I've told my kids a million times, I'm going to get it wrong. And when I get it wrong, remember that so that when you have kids, you can get those things right. But yeah,
failing and getting it wrong is the best part, because then you can tweak it. It's like a science experiment. If nothing goes wrong, you're wondering what you missed, because there needs to be things that go wrong so that you can know what to fix, so that you can know what to adjust and make the thing work the way that you're, to test out the hypothesis. And that's life. The more we fail, the more we learn. The more we collect our no's and our that didn't work, the more we can perfect. And not perfect, because there's no such thing as perfection, but the more that we can hone who we are and how we want to show up in the world and how we want to share our love and how open we get to be based on the mistakes that we make. So let's go through a couple different things. What are you aware of with this whole situation with your mom? Where's your awareness of everything?
well, more of two things. One, literally physically, I am aware of how much I've been holding my breath. I didn't realize until you said that, and I'm even now like I keep feeling myself holding my breath, which is probably where some of the physical discomfort in my chest is coming from. But then maybe a little bit spiritually too, kind of holding my breath, and I know that I do need to let the good things into.
Yeah. There's a quote by, who is it? What's his name? Gay Hendricks. Says the difference between fear and exhilaration is breath. So when you're noticing fear and anxiety, and it's that punch to the gut, that's your physiological response. And there's usually steps before that, but that's an easy way to go, oh, I'm in fear and anxiety. That's where I'm at. Okay, what's the response to that? Okay, pause, take a deep breath, 3 to 5 deep breaths, and you'll start to calm down your nervous system. And it creates a physiological response. And then the next step is, okay, now what am I thinking? That's the next level of awareness. Where are my thoughts at right now? And you mentioned a couple different things. So when your thoughts are in, I feel terrible, I didn't have time with my mom, we didn't heal this relationship, we're never going to get that time, it's all gone bad, and now I'm going to lose her. Those thoughts lead to guilt and shame and feeling awful and disempowered, which is understandable because that's what those thoughts are eliciting. And you can still have thoughts of pain. I'm going to miss her. I wish we could have healed this, and we didn't. And this is where we are. And all I can do is be here now, be with her in this moment, and remember what I'm comfortable remembering, and walk through this space as gracefully as I can. And so having those thoughts doesn't deny anything that happened. It's not going, I'm only going to focus on the things that were positive and completely disassociate from the terrible things, because you don't want to do that. That's just spiritual bypassing. You want to be able to accept it in, but you don't want to accept so much that that's all you see is the trauma. Right. And you go, it was all terrible and it was awful and all of this weight is on me. It wasn't all on you. A relationship takes two people. It's a relationship. It's relating to one another. So putting all that pressure on you isn't fair to the little girl inside, because it wasn't all up to her. It was up to your mother too. And that just didn't happen that way. So trying to go back in the past and being upset about the things that already are done, the reason that creates fear and anxiety is because you can't do anything about what's already done.
Exactly.
All you can do is now. So the best thing for that initial step is pause, take a deep breath. Even if you need to go close yourself in a hospital bathroom for a couple minutes and just sit there and bawl it out and take a couple deep breaths and then go back and be with everybody. You do the pieces that you need to as you need to. When I've gone through some pretty heavy things, I've had to do that, where I have to excuse myself, and you can make it, like, if people are worried about you, or they tend to kind of clamor over you if you're getting upset, you could say, I really have to go poop. Just make it really uncomfortable so they don't ask.
I'm good at that. I'm good at making things awkward.
Just make it awkward for them, so that you can go and take your space and be free in how you need to be. Because when it's a family thing like that, you have a lot of people involved. You have your children that are involved and impacted. You have your husband that's involved and impacted. Your mother is there. You're impacted, and everybody's bringing their stuff to that. And I can already tell you have big love for your family. So you're going to want to caretake those things. That's not your job. This is your mother, and you've already been through this a couple times this year. You need to take care of you first, because that's how you take care of them, by modeling. So, awareness. Gratitude. What can you be grateful for in what it is right now? That's not disassociating from anything, something that's just a full gratitude statement. What's one gratitude statement?
I'm grateful for the time that we have now while we're waiting for Mom to pass, the time to process my feelings and I think feel them and experience them, and I don't know, I guess just that, the time to grieve almost before she passes. I mean, we didn't get that with the other family members, so it's not so sudden this time. It's been a gradual thing, and that helps. So I'm grateful for that.
And every minute is a new minute. So you just get a minute after a minute after a minute until the minutes are done. And that's okay. How can you, this is going to sound like a weird question in the context, but how can you play with what is here?
I don't know. I feel like I still have the opportunity to talk to my mom. I feel like she can hear me in some sort of way, so I still have that. I just haven't allowed myself to do that. And I feel like I can also allow myself the space
What did you just find?
the same thing. I was gonna say to think about the good things and the good memories with my mom, but
You're holding your breath again.
I guess I just don't want to let those things out.
Which part? What's one example of something you don't want to let out? Let's let it out right here.
Just memories of my mom when she was good. And I don't want to let them out because it is harder to lose her.
Let me try a thought with you.
And then it goes back to what you said. Then it goes back to feelings of not again. I don't want to go through this again. I just lost Dad, and I don't want to feel that all over again because
am not done still processing that. I still haven't fully experienced the grief that's there with my dad, even though I've let that come out. I've just, I've opened myself up to experience grief with dad, the bad things, the good things, it's all come out with him. But with mom, I just put all the good things in a box, and I have with her for a long time, and that was how I was able to make boundaries and put up walls, like you said, armor. But every time I try to think about those things, it's painful, because if I think about good times with mom and feeling love for her and feeling like she loved me, that makes it hard to say goodbye.
Do you think that the memories will disappear when she's gone?
No, but knowing that there were times that she was good makes it feel painful.
What about that makes it feel painful? What about remembering the good times is more painful?
I guess
Just keep remembering to breathe through this.
um remembering the good times makes it painful, because then I'm losing someone that I love.
But at the same time, you're remembering the things that you love through the process. It's actually activating those. So in some ways, you're allowing yourself to let go of her with love.
Which
How does
is
that feel?
more fair to
And
let
it may feel painful to let them up, but I'm guessing it probably feels painful because there's guilt attached to those memories.
maybe. I think the guilt comes in knowing that I've hidden those things, you know? I hid those things from myself, and I guess the relationship I had with mom was very guarded, and she was angry about that. She told me that on several occasions, that she felt like I didn't love her, and I told her that I did, and that I'd forgiven her. She didn't really believe me, because I was just standoffish, and so mom, in her mind, love would have felt, warm and inviting. And I do love my mom, but I did have boundaries with her, and she didn't want the boundaries. But it's still, even she's not conscious right now, and but even when she was, all the interactions with her were just difficult. Just mom, just her personality, she's just negative.
Sometimes it's easier to tell people how you feel when they can't respond.
That's true.
So the action I want to give you from today is I want you to write a letter to your mother in full honesty and what you're grateful for, without mincing. How am I trying to say this? I call it raw gratitude, because it's not picking just pieces that were great and pretending like the other stuff didn't happen. I'll give you a specific example. My uncle passed away last summer, and we had a difficult relationship. And if you told me I'd be by his side on his deathbed, I would have said, no way in hell. No way. And yet here I was. And I realized through that I didn't want to show up with anger and hatred. And really what was under that was pain. I had been disappointed in some of the times we did bond. He really let me down. And because I loved him. And I couldn't get to that without sitting with where I was. And it was about a month. He went from getting diagnosed with a tumor in his lung to moving into his brain and then passing away all within a month.
Wow.
So it all happened pretty fast in the grand scheme of things, because he was otherwise fairly healthy. And, but not obviously at the same time. This had been building and he just didn't know. So anyway, 4 or 5 days before he passed away, he wasn't really conscious anymore. He could say a couple words and he was kind of in and out of consciousness, but for the most part, he was under. And I went, I really want to clear this before he's gone. And I couldn't seem to get past the anger. And I wrote a letter of gratitude, but I couldn't start with him because I was too angry. I was like, nothing. I'm literally not grateful for anything with you. I can't stand you, and I really need you to get this over with so I can go back to my life, which sounds terrible, but that's what I was feeling at the time.
I can relate.
Yeah. And that was my armor. My armor was, can you hurry up and move on? Because I got stuff to do. And I went, oh my God, this is not who I want to be. How do I access love in this space? So I started with people that were easy for me, that were kind of low-hanging fruit, that I'm grateful for every day, every moment, that I love all the time. And I started there and I was like, okay, that's easy. And then I moved down the list on my family line, which got exceedingly harder to do for listing the things I was grateful for. And I got to him and it wasn't as stuck. I wasn't resisting it as much. And I found this one gem of a memory when he was there for me when I was a teenager. And I realized that's why I had been so upset, because we had bonded at this time and I wanted that all the time with him, but he couldn't access that. And I was mad at him that we had had this bonding experience, and yet I was so willing to be there all the time and he chose not to. And I was pissed at him for that. And I went, oh my God. And I started to cry and I had to sit down because my legs got a little weak. And I, for the first time, didn't have the anger and the rage. I had the sadness and the grief. And I was like, I'm really grateful that he showed me that love at that time, because without that experience, I would kind of nothing him. Mm-hmm. That is why I've been so upset, because the other side of pain is love. And I went over to the other house where he lived, my grandmother's house, and he was comatose at that time, but I sat next to him and I whispered in his ear and I said, I want you to know I'm not angry anymore. And I love you. And thank you for being there for me when I was 15, because I remembered that memory. And that is what I've always wanted to get back to with you. And I hope this journey is simple. You can go when you're ready. And a tear came down his eye. And he died 2 days later. And I needed that. And I'll never forget that experience, because he heard me. Even though he wasn't able to say anything in response, my soul was able to speak to his soul, and he heard it. And I want you to have that experience with your mother. She may not be able to respond, but her soul is still there. Her body is still animated, and she is still on this plane. So write a letter to get all these things out, coming from a place of love. It doesn't have to be nice, but it has to be from love and truth. And read it to her, alone in the room with just you and her. Can you do that?
I can.
Okay.
Thank you.
You're welcome. How does that feel?
It feels better. It feels like relief, because I'm better at expressing myself when I write things down, and I hadn't thought of writing it down ahead of time to help me process my thoughts and then reading it if I have to. So that helps.
It's kind of giving yourself, do you know about float tanks?
I do.
Yeah, so float tanks are sensory deprivation, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of like that when you write it down ahead of time, because when you're talking to someone, you can be re-triggered, they respond, they have their emotional, their face reacts, even if they don't say anything. And now you're trying to process that new information coming in while still getting across what you're trying to say. But when you write it in advance, it's like a sensory deprivation, like a float tank. And you get to just be with what your process is, and you get to refine it to where you get it to a point where it's coming fully from love. And you may go through several drafts, but the process will show you where you started. And that's a process that you can replicate whenever fear and anxiety come up and you've got that punch to the gut. Whether it's this, whether it's something at work, whether it's something with your children or with your husband, you can apply the same technique of giving yourself a sensory deprivation, breathing through it, noticing your breath, noticing the shoulders coming up and the tightness, and just kind of relaxing into the feeling of it. Okay, I'm feeling some big stuff. And you start with, Brene Brown calls it a shitty first draft. So you can start with a shitty first draft. And there were several of those I'd started with before I got to the gratitude exercise. I wrote out all the reasons I was pissed. And I had to see that. I had to see it. And then I had to put that against my filter of love. Is this love? And I went, no, that's protection. That's fear. And so often we put up love we put up fear that's thinly veiled as love, and it's not. It's trying to protect ourselves. It's the armor. It's safety. But when we can trust that no matter what situation we're in, we got us, and you actually will never get into that internal core that you can really stab me in, because I would have to agree with you for you to do that.
Right.
But it means that sometimes you have to create space first so that you have that sensory deprivation, and you can build those tools into your system so that when you're in front of those things and the fear and the anxiety pops up, you know what your tools are, because inside of this meat suit, you've got things on lock.
That's the goal.
Yeah. And it's possible. It's totally possible. And it's possible because you go through, okay, what am I aware of? I find it's 7 things. What am I aware of? What am I grateful for? How can I make myself play with this? Which is what we did. And you've been such a willing participant. It's been great to be with you. I love your process.
Thank you. I appreciate your help.
You're welcome. There's nothing to be afraid of with that. It's a sandbox of our being. And that we did play with it. It might not have been necessarily fun at every moment, but we did. We tried. We began to build a sand castle in the middle of your own personal hell, and that's okay. You can find glimmers of things to play with, and you're remembering these beautiful memories with your mom. And they are. Have you ever watched the movie Inside Out?
Yes. Many times.
Yes. Isn't it a beautiful movie?
It is. My daughter absolutely loves it. She's disgust, by the way, and I'm anger.
Yep. So you've got these memories that are like the balls that have both. You've got a beautiful memory and it's tinged with sadness, or it's tinged with anger, or it's tinged with disgust. And your job is to distinguish what pieces those are and go, it's all okay. You don't have to only look at the happy part and joy, because all those pieces are what make you, you. Not just one. In the movie, you remember that joy couldn't handle everything. Sadness had to help. And sometimes anger had to take the wheel, and disgust. And you remember how terrible it was when disgust would try to be joy, or anger would try to be joy. It would come out as righteousness or frustration.
They sucked at it.
Yeah, exactly. And that's what happens when we try to cover up grief.
That's fair.
Right? I love that movie because it simplifies it so much. As human beings, we can make it really complicated, and it doesn't need to be. We are complex, and we're less complex when we go with how we're feeling and we embrace what's really going on, and instead of trying to slap a happy face on something when we don't feel happy.
But that's the Southern way.
Oh, bless your heart.
You got it.
So awareness, gratitude, play, curiosity. Those 4 will help you shift. And then when you finally feel, you'll feel it. Because all of a sudden the punch to the gut won't be there anymore. It'll be this lightness, this weightlessness. And you're like, oh, I don't feel like I'm in this pit of despair that's dragging me down. And it starts in my gut. And when you feel that, then you can switch into action and be in focus, discipline, and risk. And risk is the willingness to be seen. So when you feel that shift with your writings, where you feel the weightlessness and you feel like, okay, this is it, this is love, that's when it's time to go see your mom in the hospital. The sooner the better. So just write and write and write and write. I'd give yourself the next day or 2, if you can, to be by yourself and just hone that message so that you can say it to her. And if you go through that process and something happens in between, that's okay too. They say the soul is around for 3 days. So you can still speak it into the room and she'll hear you. So then you can go into risk, discipline, and focus. And risk is the willingness to be seen. That's reading the letter. The focus and discipline is being more committed to love than you are to the old stories. Love isn't always nice, but it's real.
That's true.
And it's felt. And you going through that process will be the best gift that you can give to your children. The best gift. Because they'll see that. They'll see the shift in you. They'll see how you managed you. And they'll remember that. When the time comes for them to be with you and it's your time to go, they'll remember that.
Well, thank you.
You're welcome. We went over a little on our time. Are you okay on time? A couple minutes to wrap up?
I'm good, yeah.
Okay. Is there anything left that you'd like to go over that feels incomplete?
No, I really do literally feel lighter, and I feel like I can breathe better now. And strangely enough, because I wasn't really breathing before and didn't realize it, but I do feel better. And I feel like I have a path forward, and I have a technique that I can use to help me process those feelings in a way that feels authentic to me.
Awesome. That's so great, Summer. That's so great. And I see it in your being. You were kind of like this before, and now you're more relaxed. And don't be afraid of the ugly cry. It's okay.
Oh, I'm really good at it.
Me too.
Right.
I make a whole show about it. All right. What value did you get from the call?
Oh gosh. You have showed me how to remember the happy things and the good things without them feeling painful. And that means a lot. Because I haven't been able to do that.
It's all of it. The beauty is in the contrast. Was there anything missing from our call today? What would you like to be appreciated for?
Say that again.
What would you like to be appreciated for?
I've never thought of that before. I guess my capacity to love and the capacity to forgive. Those 2 things.
Summer, thank you for being present with me today. Thank you for your willingness to love, to explore, to be curious of yourself, and to set that example for 3 of the next generation. Thank you for being so deeply human and exuding that into the world. I appreciate you.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I appreciate you too.
Oh, it was so good. I'm going to stop the recording. So, but don't go away. Thank you for being with me on this call today. And I'm going to touch base with you after to make sure everything's good to go. And good luck.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate it.